when I go to an event, they assume I'm speaking, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But if you think about how many events there are, it's like, man, if I did all of those, I'd never be home.
Right.
And I'd probably look worse than the photo I shared in my keynote. So we have to be conscious of that allure of the seductive quality of these things. And when you're really rooted firmly in your values and knowing what actually serves you, it becomes a lot easier to say no. Because when you say yes to that thing, you're saying no to something else. And when you're saying no to yourself too often, and you get swept up, that's when you just kind of get swept back up into the rat race. And, you're in that slipstream and it's hard to get out of it. It's going to require turbulence and a lot of effort to get out of it. It's not going to feel good. So being conscious of getting even close to it in the first place is going to help you to not get stuck there over and over again.
Hello and welcome to the LD Aviation Podcast, formerly known as the Business Aviation Collective Podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Dyer, and today we get a chance to speak with Sarah Kalmeta. And I got the really fortunate chance to see her speak when I was at the leadership conference for NBAA in Palm Springs this past January. And so I'm so excited to bring her message to our listeners. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Lindsay. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So first of all, you call yourself Sarah the Pivoter, and I want to talk about that maybe a little bit further down in the podcast and what does that mean? But I'd love to hear kind of, how did you get into aviation? How does the Pivoter attach to aviation?
Yeah, so the Pivoter came from Rosie the Riveter. And when I set up my business 4 years ago, I was thinking about my social media and what's sticky, what's going to be fun. And Pivot Point Hong Kong, I was based in Hong Kong at the time, just was a little bit of a drag. I was like, nah, it's not very exciting. So I was scrolling and just kind of thinking and playing with words. I wanted my name in it, but I also wanted something that was fun. And I saw the image of Rosie. And she has been an iconic image for me in aviation, particularly for women in aviation. And then I just, I played with the word pivot and added the ER, and it just had a nice ring to it. So that's where I got the name from.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And, at that time too, when I set up the business, I was pivoting from my corporate role with Universal Weather and Aviation into setting up my own practice. And I was doing leadership training and change management consulting at the time. It was 2020. It was the height of the beginning of COVID. And I was based in Hong Kong, very near the epicenter. And Universal being a logistics provider, if the planes are not flying, there's nothing to offer, right? So they really had to shrink their business. And a lot of the aircraft in the region left, thinking, oh, we'll wait for it. We'll go to America. We'll go to Europe. And of course, that's not what happened. It stuck around. But, to be honest with you, I'd been in the industry by that point, I've been in the industry now 15 years. So what was that? 4 years ago. So that was 11 or something like that. My math is not much.
That's all right.
And I was pretty burnt out. I was traveling 90% of the time. I was also using the travel to hide from things in my personal life that I didn't really want to face. And so I just said yes to being busy instead of actually dealing with the situations that I wanted to ignore in my relationship and how, I was living my life. And I had been thinking for about 9 or 10 months, what do I actually want to do? I love aviation. I've been doing this for a long time, but it's not I did all the things. I checked all the boxes. I made all the accomplishments that I worked so hard to achieve. And I still felt really lonely, miserable, unfulfilled. What's the greater purpose in this, right? And I was kind of struggling to find my way. And so as I was going through this forced transition, if you will, then I started talking to my mentors, my colleagues, people at Universal. And the common thread through all of that was, I tell you things that I don't ever tell anyone. I feel really safe with you. Have you thought about being a coach? And so, and I was looking at different certifications. And so that kind of nudged me in the direction of continuing with the thread of the leadership training, because I had a role with Universal doing that. I had pretty much since I started. I mean, even at 20 years old, I was leading like the TSA training for INDOC, for incoming flight crew and things like that. And I realized that this was a skill set of mine and something that I actually really enjoyed because I love personal and professional development. So that's where it ties into the aviation piece. And then, after COVID's wave, we're still kind of riding the tail end, I suppose. But, pivot became quite a hot word. And I pivoted from being based in Asia back to the US unintentionally, I might add. And, it's about pivoting your mindset, pivoting your perspective. I'm really big on the perspectives that we have in our lives, zooming out to that 30,000 foot view and getting the whole picture. Because so often we're very narrow and we don't pay attention to signals that are just in our periphery because we're too target locked. And so I decided that this was a great brand, no matter what I'm talking about or what industry I might be speaking to, because it's something that really resonates with the human condition.
I totally agree with you. Okay, so I have two questions. One, do you have any maybe quick tips on maybe how do we get out of that really focused view and how do we step back? Because I think a lot of us are probably like, I'm so busy, I can hardly get my shower in this morning. Right. Or how do we step back? Any short or easy tips?
Yes. So as I mentioned in the speech, best thing we can do is just take a deep breath. And it sounds silly because it's so simple, but most of us are not actually breathing enough. And so we're breathing too much. So we're actually going into a hyperventilation state. When we can take that deep breath, then we are stopping the amygdala hijack. The amygdala is the part of our brain that puts us into fight or flight. And business aviation is 24/7. Most of the time we're in flight or flight, like throughout the entire day, particularly if you're in charter or in operations or dealing with an AOG, right? It's just part of the job. And so learning how to separate that from your home life is difficult. So what I encourage people to do is look at it more of integration. Okay. What's the lifestyle that you operate in and thrive in? And instead of trying to think of it like work-life balance, what's the integration? And what, your integration percent might be different than mine. Okay. And based on the season of life you're in, if you've got children, if you have aging parents, if you're getting married, getting divorced, moving country, you'll have different bandwidths. So giving yourself the flexibility in that. So when you're in the moment, the best thing you can do is just take a deep breath so that you can give yourself a little bit more space and also a boost of oxygen to be able to, wait a second. Okay, let me just look at it let me see what is going on over here before I jump to a conclusion and make an assumption. But the best thing that really helped me was scheduling time in my calendar. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we start to let our boundaries slip. Okay. And we don't do the things that actually nurture us and make us optimize our performance. We know that it's good for us, right? Just like taking the shower is good for us. We know brushing our teeth is good for us. We know going to the gym is good, but there's so much to do. So I'll do it later. And then later never comes. Yeah. So scheduling it, I actually, just before this podcast recording, put in my calendar. I normally wake up very early, but I actually blocked off 7 to 8 as workout time so that if I do wake up earlier, that's a little bit of free time for me to meditate, to read, do what I need to. But that's going to be blocked off. That's sacred movement time. Yeah. And then from 8 to 11, I've just blocked it off so that nobody can book a call with me and it's in my calendar. So when I look, I will also be able to see, and I can say, I'm not available. How about this time? Sure. Yeah. Because that's when I want to do my deep work, the creative work, the deep work, the things that move the needle of our businesses, of our lives. That cannot come at the end of the day because then it never happens. So by scheduling out your time, doesn't have to be such a big block. Like I will go and break that down into specific things that I will do. But right now it's just a hold so that calls don't get booked. But when you schedule something with yourself, you just put meeting, especially if you have a work calendar. You don't have to put in there what it is, but you just put meeting. And that might be your meeting with yourself to assess what happened the week before and plan out the next week's tactics, right? It might be the meeting that, you are doing with yourself to honor the commitment of getting outside, and you're going to, take the call with no video and go for that walk, be on mute so you're not disturbing everybody, right? Don't keep the video on if you're going for a walk. It just gives people motion sickness. But I found when I was very first starting this journey, that gave me the permission to show up for myself, because I would never not show up for the meeting with you or with my client or for my friend without communication of some kind, right? And even then, I'm not going to cancel last minute unless it's an emergency. So by doing that, it's especially for people who are high performers and who love to work and really get a lot of dopamine and the rush out of that, we then have that ability to honor the commitment to ourselves a little bit more easy. It gives us permission.
Do you think, I hear you saying that once you're starting kind of your own company and you're doing this for yourself, that's when you were starting to able to block off time for yourself, right?
I started this even when I was still working in corporate, and I would block off 1 hour in my whole week, and I would just put meetings so that nobody could book a call with me. Yep. And then there weren't questions, right? The meeting might be with myself to literally sit there and have my eyes closed and meditate for 30 minutes, or just close my door and read, or do something that was going to get my energy back up. So it's still possible when you're in the corporate world. It is especially important when you're an entrepreneur, because then, especially as a solopreneur, you have to do all the things yourself. Yeah. And you can very easily ping pong around and not really get much done. So if you have targeted, hey, this 30 minutes is going to be for writing, this 30 minutes is I'm looking at my podcast, and getting very specific. The more specific you get with a task, the easier it is to complete, because it's not this gargantuan thing. Yeah. So I recommend just blocking 5 minutes. Start with 5 minutes. That's all you need. Block 5 minutes and go from there.
In your blocking too, I find you can't try and block for tomorrow. You need to block for the whole next month. For me, I have to block a month or so out in advance. And I do what you're talking about. And I agree. It's just imperative that you block your calendar for certain items. But I do it for a month out, and I will find, or even longer, maybe you have a standing 9 a.m. meeting with yourself every days or something, but just don't try and do it the day before, because you'll be like, well, I have to do this.
Well, no, because then the excuse monster comes in, and then you become very reactionary. What we're aiming to do here is move from reaction to strategic choice, right? Okay. You know that this is something that benefits you. You're declaring it's important, and you are making a commitment to yourself. And the best way to build self-confidence and self-trust is to honor your commitments to yourself. I tend to have standing commitments in my calendar that repeat daily or weekly so that I can see them. But what can often happen with that too, though, Lindsay, is it becomes part of the furniture.
Oh, true. Yeah.
So if you are not, if you do it for a month at a time, making sure that at the end of the month or the week leading up to the end of the month, you are looking ahead and you are plotting when you maybe the morning meditation didn't really work for you. You really benefit after lunch with that 5 minutes. Now you move it. So always seeking input, and the more regularly you can reflect, the better it is. I actually have a standing weekly check-in with myself where I will check in, and I have a whole series of questions where then I can go through and I can assess, hey, where am I with this? What worked well last week? What could be improved? What do I need to keep doing? What do I need to stop doing? Where can I ask for help? Who can I go to? And then this helps me just kind of process and assimilate those things. And I noticed when I skip that weekly meeting with myself, I start to go into the frenzied mode. I start to go into everything's weighing on my shoulders. But when I'm really on track, it gives me this space to make better decisions.
And then creativity too. I think that creativity comes when you're not stressed about all sorts of, 4 meetings in a row or meetings all day long and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. It comes in that quiet time, in that pause.
Yep. It totally does. Mine is in the shower sometimes. I find myself having so many ideas in the shower, and
that's so common. When you're on a walk, when you're on a shower, when you're not on one of those devices, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's because we need to process all the information that we are getting. And there's so much information now. So when we're just constantly consuming, we can't create. And we need to think of it like a lake. And there's a big stick and you just put it in the bottom of the lake and you've stirred it up. So like all the mud and the silt is now through the water. It's pretty unclear, right? You just can't see very far. Maybe you can't even see your hand. But if you wait 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour or half a day, all of a sudden that settles. And now you can see 10 meters in front of you. You can see to the other side of the lake, right?
Yeah.
And that's what it does for you. So actually I brought in a digital detox this year. Once a week, I will take 24 hours and I will not have any device. No phone, no computer, no TV, no music, just completely digitally detox. And people ask me, well, how do you coordinate with your friends? Like I did in 1998,
right?
I tell them I'm going to be at this corner at 10 a.m. and I'll see you there. And then guess what? They're there at 10 a.m. because they know otherwise I'll wait. And if they don't show up, then I leave. Right. So it is amazing what that has done, because at the beginning, the first day I did it, it's like you reach for the phone, you like go to touch it and do things. Yeah. And then it goes away and then all of a sudden you're just enjoying your experience rather than documenting everything. And it's just the brain, like it's quiet and it feels good. It's like getting a bit of a massage for your mind. And I find that the rest of the week, I'm a little bit less addicted to the phone. I'm a little bit less likely to just constantly check my email and refresh. And because a lot of professionals like to lie to themselves and say, I'm not addicted to social media, but they're constantly checking their email and their text messages. It's the same thing.
Aviation, right?
Yes.
And then I find, at least, so I'm in the scheduling dispatch world. And so a lot of my peers were afraid to have backup help. Like we want to do it all. It's type A type personality for this job in general. Yes. And we don't want to let it go. We don't want to put that phone down. Well, I agree with you. We have to encourage more people to put it down. Let somebody else take care of it. And you need that break.
So there's also this, for type A personalities in particular, there's this primal fear that gets activated that will be left behind, will be surpassed. It's going to show we're not willing, right? And when you solve that problem in the last minute, like you feel good and you feel needed and you feel important. Yeah. And so there's a certain personality that gets attracted to this world for schedule and dispatch and in charter. Mm-hmm. And we know how to thrive in chaotic environments. Mm-hmm. What that says about our upbringing, and also there's a lot that goes into that. And that's okay. But the more you become aware of these things, the more you know how to put in those measures and look for the flags and note. It took me a long time to learn how to ask for help, to not try to prove myself all the time. And instead of trying to be right, just focus on showing up and being excellent, being significant, no matter what I'm doing, right? Too much of the time we focus on the wrong metrics. And that's where we're spinning our wheels and getting into this burnout mode. And, we're having people in very young ages having heart attacks and strokes, major things that are happening. We all think it's not going to happen to us, but our bodies have a finite use of resources. And one of the other speakers at Leadership, right, the sleep doctor, the latest sleep research is showing us that if you only sleep 6 hours a night, 10 nights in a row, that's like being up for 24 hours.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Cognitively, you would function better with a couple drinks of alcohol. So, which admittedly is a big way of release for our industry too. Yes. And so we're kind of pendulum swinging back and forth with extremes, right? And so we want to bring that back into more of a mid swing, right? Just not having the extreme on or extreme off. How can we find our own way? And the only way you're going to do that is by trying, by experimenting and seeing what works for you. Because the method that works for you may be okay for me, but I can modify it, right? I can play with it and see what's going to feel good. And that's all it is. So it's a science experiment.
And I think that science experiment, you just continuously do it over and over, because what feels good today in 1 month or 1 year might not feel good anymore.
Oh, absolutely. Particularly when you go down this road, you start to like, I've got my meditation practice. I've got my yoga. I'm going to read. I'm going to do the squat challenge. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to take my dog for a walk. And if you try to do all of those things every single day for those amounts of time, next thing you know, that's like 4 hours of your day.
Yes.
Right. And you haven't done much else. And so there will be seasons where you can do that. And that's wonderful. There will also be seasons where you need to condense, or where you need to put your energy on a certain section of your life. And just know that if you're extremely focused on your personal well-being and work, but you neglect relationships and finances, right? You can't put all 100% only on these two things. But what are you willing to put your energy on? And what are you willing to delegate? I mean, even as an entrepreneur, right? You cannot do it all yourself, nor do you want to, right? Nobody should want to do it all themselves. This is like the greatest lie we've ever been sold.
That delegating too, it took me a really long time. So LDA has been in business now for 10 years. We've done it 10 years.
Amazing. Congrats.
It was me. Thank you. Yeah. I didn't know I was going to make it this far. But year 1, year 2, I was like, I'm doing all of this myself. I don't want to share it with them. Then I shared a little bit, and I got Lori, and I shared a little bit. And now we have a really good sized team. But that delegation, again, I think specifically in type A types of jobs like the scheduler dispatcher, I know that's my niche, so I know that the most, but it may take a really long while before you can actually delegate well. You're going to have to start with one small thing and then move on to more. It took me many years.
It's a skill set. And I think one of the biggest failures of business aviation is we have the blind leading the blind. No one taught, at least my personal experience, no one taught me how to delegate. No one taught me how to be a supervisor. No one taught me how to manage my own emotions and my own process before I tried to manage a team, or that distinction between managing a project and managing a team and how different they are.
Very different.
Because a project is collaborating with different people, accomplishing tasks. Managing people is managing emotions. And if you cannot successfully manage your own emotional experience, good luck trying to do it with different personality types. Because if you can't understand your own and understand that someone's different, building that bridge is almost impossible.
The great point. Yes.
One of the best books that I came across early on in my career was the Harvard Business Review, 17 Essential Skills for Leadership.
Okay.
Is it leadership or manager? No, it's manager's handbook. So 17 essential skills for management. Okay. But it goes into managing yourself first, then managing an individual, then managing a team, and then managing the business.
Sure.
So it breaks it down. But, when we're in an industry that's 24/7 and nonstop activity, you have to be really driven to try to figure it out on your own. But a lot of times we're just so inundated with tasks that, we're just navigating very murky waters to the best of our ability, and we're still falling on our face. There were a lot of things that I have done, and I'm sure still do, that I think are in the best interest of all parties. And I can reflect later and realize, actually, wow, I was way off the mark, or I didn't understand how that'd be perceived, because I was so narrow in my understanding. And some of that is time. Some of that is maturity with age. Some of that is experience. Some of that is having a really good mentor that will take you aside and in a kind way, reflect back to you what's happening.
Yep.
And so what I think we really need to focus on as leaders is sharing this information to mentor and actually train our people, not just like, hey, I'm going to date myself. Here's your BlackBerry and here's your email, right? Yep. And go forth and prosper and do the work and do it as I do, because then you're going to get different managers with different methods. So when I'm with you, I'm a gold star student, but when I'm with someone else, I'm like the worst person they've ever worked with, because it's not their process, right? And so the more we can invest in developing our people and creating that talent pipeline, not only are we going to retain the talent, but we're all going to improve the industry together, because it is a skill set to learn. Not how many 20-year-olds know how to handle a VIP phone call.
Very
especially now, they don't even know how to handle a phone call. They don't text, right? And then they use emojis, and so there's a lot of ways that we misunderstand each other. And then you throw culture into the mix. Particularly, we work in an international environment, and so I think one of the best things we can all do is learn more, build our awareness around our own emotional experience so that we can manage our response to things, and then understand how others are different from us so that we can bridge that gap.
Very good point, Sarah. I'm going to bring back the scheduler dispatcher position again, partly because that's just my niche. But many, and I would maybe say most of us, were dropped into these jobs and said, go ahead and do it. And we weren't really given a manual or a handbook. So I think that training that, like you said, comes with also training you to manage yourself and manage others. It just doesn't happen. And I wonder if there's a correlation between the fact that oftentimes schedulers are not put in positions of leadership, because oftentimes we're not even taught those skills from the beginning. And it would probably require us to go outside and learn it somewhere else, because many times we're single. There's just one person in the office. So who are you going to practice managing? You can practice managing yourself, but you never get to that step where you're managing one person. Or maybe you get to that step where you're managing one person, but you don't know how, you can't manage a team because the scheduler dispatcher position oftentimes just doesn't move up the rungs, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I started, I was scheduling, it was me and the DO, right? The director of ops. And we swapped the on-call every week, and we managed, when we got to 9 airplanes, I remember he came in and was like, we signed the 9th airplane. I about cried. I was like, did you hire someone yet? Because this is too much now. And this was like before we had just gotten BART. So a lot of this was in Excel. I mean, this was even harder than it is now with the tools of technology that we have. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I did go outside. I did go get training from Thunderbird and from, going and getting a higher education or taking a certification or a course, and then using that skill set just in my communication back with the team. So one of the ways that I learned was by getting the opportunity to be a trainer.
Yes.
I did a lot of that, like in the very beginning. I mean, it's kind of funny. I was 20 years old and I was doing the sexual harassment training for this company. I was basically like, what you're thinking, don't ever say that out loud. And, but, I always had these opportunities because I put my hand up to be able to teach in this environment. And I geek out on this type of stuff too. So I guess what I'm saying is, where you can learn, even if there's not the opportunity in your position, is to put your hand up for things like that, or lead a group. Sometimes companies will organize kind of like a co-op group between different departments. Working on an entry into service project is really great. Maybe saying, hey, I'd like to take the lead on the next one, because you are going to be managing different people from different departments, and learning how to also manage a project that requires the cooperation and involvement of someone else in an adjacent department who might even be a higher position than you, or maybe they're the same or lower, but they're going to be thinking like, you're not my boss. Why do I need to listen to you? You will learn how to communicate with people, influence them, build relationships. And, I encourage everyone to seek those resources. And maybe, you can go to your company, make a business case. Hey, I saw there's this course at the local community college or online. There's so many resources now. Yep. This will help me in these ways. This will help the department in these ways, and make a pitch and a business case so that they can cover the cost for you. You don't know until you try and until you ask. And maybe it's just something they've never thought of before, because these businesses often grow so quickly that we're just trying to stay afloat and keep our nose above water, right? But if you can come in and show like, hey, I've done some groundwork, this skill set's going to really help not only me, but this whole department. And then I'll teach it to other people. Like I can run a course internally. Now you're adding value, right? And this is also giving you the opportunity to, again, lead. The other way you can do it is joining industry associations like MBAA. There's different councils and committees you can join. There's regional groups in business aviation. There's wider pilot associations like AOPA and Women in Aviation and 99s and all sorts. And then further out than that from aviation, you've got local community events. If you have got children, helping run things in their school. So you can find these opportunities for leadership and developing these skill sets that even if you might be in a smaller team or a smaller company, you can still create those opportunities for yourself.
Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing is management or learning to manage doesn't necessarily being assigned subordinate. Managing is communicating and getting your ideas across and receiving other people's ideas, no matter what situation it is. It does not have to be you're above them and you're going to tell them when they can have a vacation. This is, I guess I really resonate with that. You were talking about project management. You're leading a project management group and you're working with all these different people from different departments. But that is managing. It is managing people because you have to talk to all those different groups. Anyway, I thought that was a cool point.
Yeah. And, it's also important to distinguish. So what you mentioned there about it doesn't matter at your title, if there's someone under you, that's leadership, because you can lead people from any seat. You can be the voice of the company, the change agent, even if you're the janitor, right? But you've been with the company 20 years and everyone, and you can really help create the oil between the gears that make things run smoothly. And when you're on board, everybody else is like, oh, they're on board. I'm going to listen. This sounds cool. Right. Whereas you're the kind of barometer for social change. That's also leading. So managing and leading are slightly different, and you don't need a formal title to lead, nor does anyone ever have leader on their business card. It's always manager, director, associate, executive, whatever, CEO, right? But that doesn't mean that you can lead well. You might manage well, but managing and leading are two different things. Mm-hmm. Leading is, there's many different styles of leadership, but leading is essentially bringing a group of people into your vision and into this big idea and guiding them towards that thing together. Managing is making sure the individual tasks and tactics are being accomplished and you're ticking a box. They're very different things, but it allows us to expand the way we look at what's possible within our organization.
That's a very good point. I love it. Are there any courses that you might have taken? I see you have a fair amount of courses you've had here. Any ones that stand out that you would suggest to our listeners?
Yes. So I really believe in understanding the self as much as possible, because the more you understand yourself, the better alignment you are with the choices you make, right? Because you're not making choices for the ideal version that may never exist because you're painting this false picture of what you think you want versus what you actually want. So before we look at even just courses, I would say hire a coach. Find someone that really resonates with you.
Yeah.
Whatever their qualifications are, like just find someone that you listen to and you're like, you know what, this person, I vibe with them. I respect them. I have something to learn here, and have a few sessions. Dive into that personal development. I think that's the most important place to start. From there, you're going to gain a lot of clarity on the resources that will be most beneficial to where you're at in the journey. Because here I am almost 20 years into my aviation career. If I recommend something that I just did last year, that may not be beneficial for you if you're just starting out, or if you're brand new to aviation, or if you've never touched a personal development tool in your life, right? And all of this is new. So I think that is one of the best places you can start, finding someone that really resonates for you, where you feel safe enough to have a real conversation and to look in the mirror and uncover the real you. And then once you create that safety and awareness around that, then you can start adding on other resources. There are some fantastic tools on Coursera or Coursera, however you pronounce it.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll link it below in the details, in fact.
Yeah. And Udemy, LinkedIn Learning has some really great tools as well. Another thing is talk to your mentors, talk to the people in your inner circle that you see are doing different things and find out like what's the value that they've gotten from that. I recently have done, last year I did the Space Kind journey, which is a leadership program, and it's designed for people in the space industry. But if you just have a love for space, it's also very valuable. And essentially what it is it's the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, rising to the challenge of digging into your why, healing relationships, understanding what conscious communication is, how to actively listen. So it's really, really powerful, particularly for people who are in the like STEM careers, who are very logical, linear left brain thinkers. Mm-hmm. And it's a great entryway. So if anyone's interested, we've got a new cohort starting May 7th, Space Kind 13.
Okay.
And, the whole premise is that we're already on a spaceship hurtling through space. It's called planet Earth. And we need to act like crew members of planet Earth, because when you're a crew, whether you're on an aircraft or on a spaceship, you have a common goal, you have a common mission, and it's in everyone's best interests and safety to be able to communicate well, effectively, and not have problems, right? Sometimes we have environments in a crew in an airplane that don't work very well, and we have to move people around. When you're in a spaceship, you can't do that as easily, right? So you really have to get clear on these things and not just let things simmer under the surface. So that's one that I recently did that I actually love so much. I'm now a group lead on, and I help run the program with Loretta and Christina Starr. And it's been phenomenal. Cyan Proctor, who spoke at Leadership last year, she was one of the very first Space Kinders. Yes. And she had that before she went up to space, and she said it helped her tremendously on her journey. So that I've got that one. If anyone's interested to learn more, I'm happy to talk about it.
Right.
And then, if you're really passionate about something, try taking a class on it. Really getting out of the comfort zone, but not so much that you're just not going to go because you're so scared, but something that's going to push the edges a little bit, right? We actually thrive when we can push the boundaries. I just watched a great video on flow state before we went live, and he was talking about when we can push our boundaries by 4%, that's kind of like the sweet spot for our flow state. Okay. So, when we
just 4%,
just 4%. And, talking about compounding interest, if you're just doing 1% every single day, that's 37x in a year. Yeah. We don't have to do the big pivot, the big swing. We can do the small thing consistently. So, I always encourage people to, if there's something that's fun for you, you're going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So find the thing that's fun. Find the thing that feels good so that it's an easy win. And you know what? Sometimes those people that you meet at racquetball or pickleball or in your local painting school or your improv comedy class, sometimes they become your best friends. Sometimes they become your next employer or business partner, right? And they open your mind up to different things. And so that's a really unconventional way of learning. But I think that it's important, particularly in business aviation, to not just go down this track of CAM is great. I'm actually applying for the Women in Corporate Aviation Scholarship so that I can then take my CAM.
Right.
But at the same time, it's important to build all of ourselves, not just the one track. So getting into places where your viewpoint will be challenged, will be questioned. And a lot of times when we get angry about the questions that we get asked, when someone challenges our worldview on something, it's because we're not actually that sure ourselves.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And so we feel threatened. So our only response is to become defensive. When you can be absolutely sure that that is what you believe, then you're like, yeah, cool. Well, and you're absolutely sure that you believe that. Great. Let's have a conversation. Let's be curious. Why? And you approach it very differently. So I like to say curiosity is the balm that soothes wounds, that soothes disagreements, The more you can bring curiosity to the table, the easier and smoother things become.
Well, and bringing back to just simple things like clarifying questions. Maybe the two people or people who are having a disagreement or a discussion on that conversation, maybe you do have views that are actually a little bit more aligned, but maybe you aren't communicating well with each other. So yeah, curiosity.
Sometimes you think you've communicated really well. And like just a couple weeks ago, I thought I communicated something so clearly to my partner. And it was like, great, we're on the same page. Everything's good.
Mm-hmm.
And then like 5 minutes later, I realized like, whoa, what's going on here? Like, and we had this whole conversation about it. We were not on the same page. And there was a big misunderstanding, but we were able to tune in and communicate and clarify and find our way through it. But it can still happen, even with the best intentions, even with all the work you might have already done. We can still stumble, and that's okay. It's not about being perfect. It's just about seeking understanding and aiming to connect. When we communicate, it should be about connection, not about domination or being right or winning. It should be about connection.
Mm-hmm. Very good point. And like you said, in your whole life, personal life, work life, in all situations, in public, when you're walking along at the store. Yeah. I really love some of what you had said right in the beginning. And you talked about, we see a lot of burnout right now and people who are doing these jobs and they're burnt out. They don't like what they're doing. And I think what you do is so cool because you help people step back, take a breath, step back and figure out what is it that I do want to do. And you are an inspiration because you've already done that. You've taken the steps. And I want to also say too, it's not like you did this in one day. You didn't leave a job and do it one day. So these are processes and they take a while. But I really just think it's so cool and inspirational about what you do because you removed yourself from a situation that was not good for you, just a lifestyle that was not good for you. And you are making changes. And I'm sure you're continuing to make changes along the way. I just think it's so cool that you're encouraging others to do that.
Thank you very much. And, you're right. It was not an overnight thing. And it's still sometimes like I'm still type A and I still love to work. And so, you can get wrapped up in it. Right. And, I'm 4 years into the entrepreneurship journey. There's a lot of ups and downs and feeling like you're going in circles. So surrounding myself with mentors and support systems has been absolutely crucial because it's easy to get burnt out doing that also, even when you love something. What I had to realize when I made the switch is that a lot of the stuff I geek out on, like health, performance, sociology, why people do the things they do, all of a sudden that's now really wrapped up in my work. So when I read those books, my brain's ticking over on how does this weave into my message? How do I implement this into my speech? How do I bring this into how I show up every day? And so I'm not turning off. I'm not relaxing like I used to. So actually last year I had to give myself permission, literally wrote myself a permission slip. It works. There's this weird thing we have because the way we were raised in school. So I wrote down, Sarah, you have permission to read fiction books. And I started to read fiction again. And it was amazing because I had so much fun. I get lost in the book. Sure, I might be sometimes not getting enough sleep because I'm like locked into this amazing book.
Yep.
But it's rejuvenating me in a different way. And, when you're reading fiction books, you're learning a lot about politics, communication, culture, the way people interact with each other. So there is a benefit. And I just saw a video this morning. It was with Emily Fletcher, who founded the Ziva method. It's a meditation method. Okay. I'm forgetting the gentleman's name. One of my friends sent it to me. And it's about the power of play.
Okay.
And he's like, if I found his name, you would know probably who he is, or at least when you saw his photo, you'd recognize him.
Okay. Well, if you find it, you can send it to me later and I'll put it in the details for people.
Yeah, I will share it because it was a really powerful short video. And he was talking about how he had introduced play as a requirement into his daily life. And the shift that took place, even in just a year, was phenomenal. So as soon as I watched this video, I put in my calendar at 6 p.m. every day. I'm going to stop whatever I'm doing and I'm going to dance for 60 seconds. Okay. I'm going to pick a song and I'm going to dance. I don't care who I'm with. Hey, if I'm ever giving a keynote at 6 p.m., maybe you're going to see me dance, right?
All right.
And I actually need to find out. I'm sure there's an app where it can like randomize it. So just every day is a different time.
That would be cool.
I'm sure it exists, or I'll figure out a way to get that to work. But he talks about prioritizing joy and putting that into, again, if it's in your calendar, you're going to do it, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to build in a few other little things that I can do so that I really prioritize this, because it's very, very powerful. Play is not just for children. It's very important for adults. The power of play cannot be understated. I mean, it's why those games are so addictive. It's why all of you are playing Candy Crush. It's why all of you are checking the notifications because the bubble number changes, right? We're getting the dopamine hit. These scientists are very smart. They're hacking into like our primal system. Mm-hmm. But, that taking the time to get here, even just now, we're Q1, just at the start of Q2 about, right? And all of a sudden, there's all these opportunities in front of me, and they're really exciting. And there's ideas flowing, and people, when I go to an event, they assume I'm speaking, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But if you think about how many events there are, it's like, man, if I did all of those, I'd never be home. Right. And I'd probably look worse than the photo I shared in my keynote. So we have to be conscious of that allure, of the seductive quality of these things. And when you're really rooted firmly in your values and knowing what actually serves you, it becomes a lot easier to say no. Because when you say yes to that thing, you're saying no to something else. And when you're saying no to yourself too often, and you get swept up, that's when you just kind of get swept back up into the rat race, and, you're in that slipstream, and it's hard to get out of it. It's going to require turbulence and a lot of effort to like get out of it. It's not going to feel good. So being conscious of getting even close to it in the first place is going to help you to not get stuck there over and over again.
So cool. And you were kind of talking about, even before we started recording, that you do have some really wonderful projects coming down the line. Did you want to share any of those? Are there any public ones that we could come see you at, or where are you speaking at next?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm really focusing on this year is the podcast. I have guests every week until December, which is wonderful. And so that's something I'm really focusing on. I've just gotten a sponsorship with Whoop, which is the band that I wear. So I'm now affiliate with them. And that I did talk about that at leadership. It has been one of the most instrumental things. I've just had it for 2 months. I resisted it for a long time because I was a competitive athlete for many years in a few different sports. And I didn't want to get sucked back into that mindset.
Okay. Yeah.
And I listened to the podcast, A Diary of a CEO with Kristen Holmes, fitness scientist. I'll share that link with you too. Okay. I honestly think that everyone in our industry should watch and listen to that podcast.
Okay.
Because it's going to hit home. And it hit home so hard for me that I immediately went and got a Whoop. My best friend has been trying to get me to get a Whoop for like 2 years. And I was like, nah, don't need it.
Did she say I told you so now?
Well, my best friend's a man, but he and his wife both had it. And they were both always trying to convince me every time I saw them. And I was just like, guys, I don't do the CrossFit thing anymore. I don't need that. I listened to this podcast and immediately bought it. And my partner listened to the podcast and he told me he was having shower thoughts, and then he bought it. And now we are actively making different decisions on our lifestyle choices because of how we notice how it makes us feel, because we're more aware now.
Okay.
And
now I'm going to have to go look at the.
Oh yeah. So I'll share the link with you. It's also in my Instagram. If you guys follow Sarah the Pivoter, the Whoop link's on my LinkedIn, and it's also in my Linktree address, which you can get from Instagram also. But you can get 30 days free when you sign up using my link. And if you decide you hate it, you can stop after the 30-day free trial. But I like it better than the Oura ring because I don't want to wear the ring. It's a bit thick. My hands swell because of temperature and stuff. So and then weight training is a little bit clunky for me. So I prefer the wristband of the Whoop. And the lifestyle factors you start to understand and how they affect you, particularly around travel, circadian rhythm, wearing blue light glasses, eating during daylight hours, sleeping, performance, all of this, you start to understand so much more. And it's really incredible how just a few, again, tiny little shifts. I haven't slept this well since I was in high school.
Really?
Yeah. I haven't felt this good in my day-to-day probably since I was in my 20s.
Nice.
And it's been very, very powerful. And what I really love, what I'm actually aiming to champion is doing some case studies with a few different organizations in our industry, because they have an organization program too.
Okay. All right.
And making this kind of like the gold standard so that when people are coming, they're like, hey, do you have a program like this? Do you use Whoop or any sort of?
Sure. Yeah.
Because as SMS comes online, which to me is also interesting. I used SMS for over a decade before in Asia. And so coming back to the US and realizing that was not the case over here was a bit of a shock. But
that is interesting.
Imagine that your dispatchers and your flight crew and your mechanics all have this device. Not only can you start to gamify some of the health and well-being and think about it as performance, we are optimizing your mental, physical, and emotional performance. This can be gamified and there could be rewards tied to that. What gets rewarded gets done. That is a proven thing in management practice and study all over for many years.
Okay.
But imagine now we take this really seriously and I see that you have a red recovery for 3 days in a row and you look like crap, but you're telling me you feel fine. I can now say, you know what? No, you're not actually fit to fly. You're not safe. You're not going to be psychologically safe to make decisions. You're going to go on rest. We're going to call someone else in.
That would be spectacular. And it would be so cool because I think we probably see that maybe start in the pilot world,
right,
when we're really looking at these safety items. But if it could trickle down in just to the maintenance and the scheduling and just the entire flight department or entire any organization.
ATC, right? Like that, we know that fatigue is a problem. And we know that people are not going to self-report because they don't want to lose their job. Right. So if we create an environment where it is celebrated, like I said in my speech, we're celebrating, like you got a green recovery every day this week. Here's a bonus or here's this or whatever, that is going to change the culture. And it's actually a safety requirement. And it's also, dispatchers, maybe you're a scheduler, you don't have a dispatch license. You're not tied to the AOC. It's not a regulatory requirement. However, you are making decisions that affect the entire operation of a multi-million-dollar asset. You are involved to the degree where if you forget that permit or you forget a communication, that has a trickle-down effect. And that can cost a lot of money for an organization. That can cost reputation. It can also become a safety incident. What if you send the wrong details of a flight plan? What if something else is messed up? And because of the last minute nature, the early departure time, whatever it is, the flight crew doesn't catch it. Right? Yeah. So there are a lot of ramifications, and it's not this like suck it up buttercup lifestyle anymore. Like it's not stuff your emotions down into your pinky toe and pretend they don't exist. Because I'm sorry, men, but frustration and anger are also emotions.
Yes.
So, it's data. And so when we learn to look at this stuff as data and we can really use it to our benefit, so much is different. So that's a big project that I want to be very vocal about because I want to get as many people on board as possible. And no matter what device ultimately that you choose, I just think that awareness is going to shift so many things for us. I also have coming up, I'm going to be working at the Eclipse with Cyan Proctor in just a couple of weeks. Yes. And Loretta, the founder of Space Kind, Frank White overview. In fact, there's going to be some really cool space people there. So I'm totally geeking out on that. And then in May, there's the Analog Astronaut Conference, which is also something that Cyan has founded with Jazz out of the UK. And then in July, I'll be going to AIN's Corporate Aviation Leadership Summit. I'll be speaking there, moderating a roundtable. The topic's not yet determined, but likely to be around mental health and things of this nature, optimizing our performance. So personal performance and business performance. And then there's a few others. I've noticed there's been this interest and trend where I'm now having the conversation and speaking to the regional business aviation groups about their business aviation days and about their safety stand downs. There's more and more attention on this, which I think is really important. I'm a big advocate for mental health. And as Heidi Hanna said at Leadership, another word for mental health is brain performance. We want to optimize our brain performance. And in order to do that, we have to do certain things, right? And that is not only a safety critical thing, but it's a requirement to live a good life and to live a healthy life, right? We don't want to retire and then have a heart attack within a year because all the adrenaline and cortisol dumps in your system.
Yes. I think that's a really good point. And the more, the healthier you are, the better you're feeling on a daily basis. I mean, you said you felt so good. You've been sleeping so good. That just can only enhance your work life.
Absolutely.
Maybe it gets you out of those doldrums and it gets you out of the, bored of your job or unhappy at your job. So that's
what it also has given me is this opportunity to really find gratitude in things that we start to dismiss. If we look at children, look at how much awe they have when they experience things, right? They're so fully present in the moment. Everything's amazing. I mean, the fact that there's an atmosphere with just the right oxygen levels for us to live on this spinning rock through space is pretty incredible.
It
right?
is. It really is.
The fact that we have these amazing technologies, the fact that I woke up this morning, the fact that we're here. Do you remember when it used to be? Skype used to be like the biggest deal ever.
Yeah.
When I first moved to Asia, that's how I used to have to contact my friends and family was through Skype, and it wasn't that stable. We could barely do audio. I remember going on trips with my family, when I was a teenager, and like getting the calling cards, I had to scratch it off with a coin and like dial all the numbers, and it was super expensive. Even like the Wi-Fi in aircraft, you can just connect for free for messaging now on airplanes, whereas that used to be really expensive as well. So I find that by optimizing my performance, my experience of life is different. The way that I'm looking at things is different. And what's happening is it's your reticular activating system, the RAS. When you buy a red car, all of a sudden you notice all the red cars on the road.
Yeah, right.
As a woman, when you become pregnant, all of a sudden everyone else is pregnant. Yeah. They're everywhere, right? Like they were always there. You just didn't notice them. Yeah. That's exactly what I am talking about when I'm talking about slowing down. When we choose what we're going to focus our energy on, we begin to notice it everywhere. So if we are consciously putting an effort on things like, what am I grateful for today?
Yeah.
Or expressing gratitude to a mentor, or being really present and not on the device when we're with our children, we start to invite more of the same because we're telling our brain, this is important, look out for this. And so it finds it automatically. And that's when those synchronicities start to happen, right? Yeah. That's when you're like, man, if I would have turned left instead of right, I wouldn't have met this person.
Yeah.
Just the other day, I saw an AIN article about the Women's Career Symposium.
Okay.
And I was like, I didn't even know this existed. Great. I'm going to contact him for this year. I go to dinner at Women in Aviation that night.
Yeah.
And like Jessica Belcher's over here, and I brought a friend, and I was like, okay, I know Jessica well. I'm going to let my friend sit over here. I'm going to go sit next to this other woman and talk to her. Guess what? She works on that event.
No way.
And she's like, we were just talking about speakers. Amazing. Send me your information. I'll forward it on. And it's like those kind of things you start to tap into because you're really present rather than I could have been on my phone trying to find out who to connect with, or, oh my gosh, I have to do the post instead of be present with my people. So it's really amazing when you feel different, your fight or flight system turns off.
Yep.
And you are more in the rest and digest, or as my friend who's a relationship coach likes to say, the breed and feed. We don't breed and feed when we're in stress trying to run away from the tiger situation, but we do when we feel calm and we're happy, and everyone would enjoy a little bit more of that. So
for sure. Yes. Definitely. Let's aim for more of that feeling. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for your time today. It's really been great. And I think you just bring up so many insightful ideas and topics. I can't wait to see you speak again. I just really feel like it was a privilege. I'm very grateful to have gotten to see you while we were in Palm Springs. So
thank you so much, Lindsay. It's been so great to connect with you since then. And I love your podcast and what you're doing as well for the industry. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yes. Oh, quick before you go, if somebody wanted to contact you and find you, I know we kind of mentioned some Instagram, but Will you rattle off a couple of spots and we'll put them in the details on the bottom so people can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to sarahkalmeta.com. You can look up Sarah the Pivoter on all social platforms. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. Don't use it very much. And X. Also don't use that very much. But if you Google Sarah the Pivoter, you'll probably find me. Send me a connection request and I'd be happy to connect.
Wonderful. Great. Well, thank you again very much, Sarah. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Lindsay. Have a great afternoon. This has been great.
Thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for more episodes and check out our website for up-and-coming podcasts. This has been a production of the Business Aviation Collective, sponsored by LD Aviation.